Welcome to Arsenal, where the weapons and war machines of military history come to life. Today, we explore the M551 Sheridan in Vietnam between 1969 and 1972, and the crews and opponents who gave it its reputation. A longer version of this feature, with fact sheets and photos, is available in the print edition, on LinkedIn, or by email. If you enjoy learning how technology, tactics, and human decisions come together in combat, you can find more articles, podcasts, and resources at trackpads.com.
The jungle around the night defensive position is still black when the first rocket-propelled grenade hisses in. The Sheridan's crew feels it before they see it, a flat crack in the darkness and dirt hammering the aluminum hull. The driver is already awake, boots on the pedals, eyes shifting between red instrument glow and the vague trail ahead. Above him, the commander kicks the gunner's boot and snaps him fully awake with one word: contact.
Flares pop overhead and the world turns white and green. The low turret swings toward the tree line, where muzzle flashes stutter and vanish. The gunner fights the sight picture as the tank shudders on its torsion bars. The commander calls for beehive, a flechette round that turns the 152mm gun into a giant shotgun. When it fires, the blast rolls across the position and out into the paddies like a physical blow.
Infantry nearby hug the ground, shouting through small arms fire and the Sheridan's concussion. They are close enough to depend on the big gun and close enough to fear it. Somewhere beyond burning brush and drifting smoke are enemy rocket teams who came in believing light armor would be easy prey. Tonight they are learning how violently this awkward airborne tank can answer when it is in the right place and properly handled. Arsenal is the Friday feature of Dispatch, United States Military History magazine.
By dawn, the contact has burned down to sporadic fire and empty brass. The little tank squats in churned mud, thin hull scorched and dented, but still running. The crew are exhausted and half-deaf. Around them, the perimeter looks like both battlefield and repair yard, with craters, torn sandbags, smoke, and spent flares. In Vietnam, this is what the Sheridan has become: a mobile bunker, improvised artillery piece, and lightning rod for enemy fire.
That was not the role imagined when the Sheridan's story began. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, the United States Army faced a Cold War problem. Airborne and light armored units needed enough firepower to matter against increasingly heavy Soviet tanks, but without losing the speed and deployability that made them valuable. Existing light tanks, such as the M551 Walker Bulldog, were fast and familiar, but too heavy for safe parachute delivery and too lightly armed for confidence against newer armor. The Army was also embracing air mobile and rapid reaction forces. Paratroopers and helicopter-borne infantry could seize airfields, block passes, or reinforce threatened sectors quickly. What they lacked was a gun that could arrive with them in the first wave. Heavy tanks, such as the M48 Patton, had protection and proven firepower, but they were too heavy for airborne delivery and too demanding for fragile bridges, roads, airstrips, and landing zones in many likely theaters.
On paper, the answer was a radically light tank with an outsized punch. The concept that became the M551 Sheridan promised an aluminum-hulled vehicle light enough to be airdropped or air-landed, yet armed with a large gun able to fire conventional rounds and a guided anti-tank missile. In Europe, it would help airborne and cavalry units threaten enemy tanks at range. Elsewhere, it would provide mobile fire support wherever roads and airstrips could take it.
The risks were obvious: thin armor, combustible ammunition, complex missile electronics, and a small chassis carrying a large weapon made the Sheridan a high-stakes experiment. Every pound saved in armor or structure could reappear as vulnerability in combat. Still, the Army needed an answer quickly and moved toward production.
That decision meant the vehicle's first sustained combat test would come not on European plains, but in Vietnam's rice paddies, jungle roads, and rubber plantations.
Turning the concept into metal meant solving conflicting demands. The Army wanted a vehicle light enough to drop by air, amphibious enough to swim rivers, and strong enough to threaten contemporary tanks. Earlier light tank programs had failed when vehicles grew too heavy or could not meet new requirements. The solution shifted towards a large, low-velocity cannon paired with a missile, mounted on a compact aluminum chassis instead of a traditional steel hull. A design from the Cadillac Motor Car division of General Motors won the competition. Engineers shaped a low, boxy hull to save weight and space, then placed a 4-man crew in a turret large enough for commander, gunner, and loader to work in a familiar pattern. At the center sat the 152mm gun and launcher. Around it, designers wrestled with recoil, ammunition handling, electronics, and the need to keep the whole vehicle small enough for air transport and special delivery methods. At a glance, the Sheridan was an American airborne and reconnaissance light tank. It carried a driver in the hull and 3 crewmen in the turret. Its primary armament was the gun and missile launcher, backed by a turret-top heavy machine gun and a coaxial medium machine gun. On roads, it could reach highway speeds and travel hundreds of miles on a full tank of fuel. With flotation gear, it could swim narrow waterways. In combat trim, it weighed a little over 17 tons, far lighter than main battle tanks. Production began in the mid-1960s as the debate over the design continued. Supporters pointed to strategic mobility and a powerful gun. Critics worried about aluminum armor, missile reliability, and combustible case ammunition stored inside a cramped fighting compartment. More than 1,000 Sheridans were built before production ended. Some reached troops before every part of the weapons concept was fully mature, and Vietnam would reveal both the advantages and the painful weaknesses of that decision.
Seen from outside, the Sheridan looks almost delicate beside heavier tanks. The tall, angular hull is made from aluminum alloy plates that save weight but lack the reassurance of thick steel. The turret sits high, with a stubby barrel and commander's cupola carrying a heavy machine gun. Fittings for flotation gear hint at amphibious ambitions. On narrow jungle trails, the compact footprint and lively suspension made it feel more like a rough-riding scout than a conventional main battle tank.
Inside, the driver sits low in the front hull, nearly reclined among controls and periscopes. Behind him, the commander, gunner, and loader work in close quarters around the turret ring. The gunner faces sights, controls, and indicators for the gun and missile system. Ammunition crowds the space, including bulky rounds that must be handled carefully because of their combustible cases. The loader's job is hard in any tank. In a bouncing Sheridan with a large round and little room, it is especially demanding. The commander manages radios, watches through sights and periscopes, directs the driver, gives fire orders, and often handles the turret-top machine gun. In Vietnam, commanders added shields and improvised protection around hatches to survive small arms and fragments while fighting from open positions. Behind the fighting compartment, a compact diesel engine gives the Sheridan strong power for its weight. The cost is heat, noise, and maintenance work that crews must live with in the field. Veterans remember the Sheridan as lively but unforgiving. Its big gun rocks the light hull, shakes dust from fittings, and fills the turret with fumes if ventilation fails. The thin armor and complex weapon system require constant attention. On paper, it is a flexible scout and missile carrier that can swim and deploy by air. In combat, it behaves more like a fragile, over-armed brawler that must pick its fights carefully. In Vietnam, the Sheridan did not arrive as a sleek tank killer. It became close fire support for armored cavalry in the Mekong Delta and along the Cambodian border. Sheridans joined mixed columns of infantry carriers, gun trucks, and engineers. A typical day might begin with a squadron leaving a night defensive position, Sheridans up front, to nose down suspicious tracks,
fire into tree lines, and cover engineers clearing mines and roadblocks. The large gun gave commanders immediate power against bunkers, ambush sites, and close assaults.
On jungle highways and in patchwork rice paddies, crews acted as both bait and shield. The thin hull could not shrug off heavy mines or well-placed rocket-propelled grenades, but the turreted gun and heavy machine gun made the Sheridan a natural focal point in any fight. It led assaults into tree lines, ringed fire support bases, reinforced outposts, and anchored road junctions. When commanders needed mobile direct fire quickly, a Sheridan often went first, drawing enemy attention as it delivered fire in return. Night defensive positions became one of the places where those trade-offs were most obvious. Parked on berms or near wire, Sheridans could bring sudden heavy fire against probes and assaults, but they also attracted rockets, mines, and small arms fire. Infantry wanted them close because the gun could break an attack quickly. Crews knew that being close to the most threatened point also meant being close to the enemy's first aimed shots. The beehive round became one of its most feared tools. Fired into a hedgerow, trench, or tree line, it sent a dense cloud of flechettes outward and could break up an attack before it reached the wire. Infantry valued that instant wall of steel. The cost of such power was severe. Mines could tear away suspension units, breach the hull, or ignite fuel and ammunition. Combustible cases that saved weight could feed fires after penetration. Crews answered with sandbags, track links, spare road wheels, and welded shields. Sheridan crews often described their vehicle as a machine of extremes. On the positive side, it was fast, agile, and hit hard for its size. Its power-to-weight ratio let it cross soft ground, move quickly along the perimeter, and reposition faster than heavier tanks. The 152mm gun offered high explosive, canister, and other rounds for bunkers, infantry concentrations, or light structures. The familiar turret layout and cupola-mounted heavy machine gun were useful in close fights. The same qualities that made it deployable also made it vulnerable. Aluminum armor could stop small arms and fragments, but mines and rockets were another matter. Hits a heavier tank might survive could be fatal to a Sheridan, especially if ammunition ignited inside the tight turret. Dust, heat, and rough handling strained the gun and missile system. In Vietnam, the guided missile was seldom used, leaving the Sheridan to rely mainly on conventional rounds and the blast of its main gun. Enemies adapted quickly. Rocket teams waited for columns to commit, then aimed at thin sides or rear armor. Booby-trapped roads and culverts targeted fragile running gear, knowing a disabled Sheridan could block movement and draw more fire. Comparisons with the M48 Patton were unavoidable. The Patton was much heavier and unsuitable for airborne delivery, but crews trusted its steel armor more. Cavalry units valued the Sheridan's mobility and firepower while understanding that it carried less margin for error. Combat experience drove modifications. The basic M551 remained recognizable, but units added extra armor plates, track links, sandbags, and improvised shields. Some vehicles received improved fire control parts, night vision devices, and changes to ammunition stow-ins intended to reduce catastrophic fires. In many combat zones, the delicate missile equipment was de-emphasized or disabled, turning the Sheridan into a conventional gun tank with a very large low-velocity cannon. Outside Vietnam, the original airborne and reconnaissance role remained important. Airborne units trained with Sheridans dropped or air-landed from transport aircraft, refining ways to bring armored firepower into remote airfields and crisis zones. Reliability lessons led to better maintenance procedures and incremental improvements. Later armored gun system concepts drew from the same desire: give light infantry and rapid reaction forces mobile direct fire without the burden of full-sized main battle tanks. The Sheridan's influence was indirect but real. It forced the Army to confront the trade-offs of airborne armor in concrete form: weight against protection, firepower against reliability, sophistication against rugged field use.
Later designs often returned to more conventional guns and ammunition to avoid some of its worst problems. The M551 did not create a long line of descendants, but it shaped the questions designers and soldiers kept asking about light armored fire support.
Today, the Sheridan's legacy is a mix of hard lessons and quiet respect. Veterans remember a flawed but necessary vehicle that saved lives with firepower, even as its thin skin exposed crews to serious risk. For years, Sheridans also served as visually modified enemy tanks at major training centers, helping soldiers practice against armored threats. Their mobility and silhouette made them useful stand-ins long after their frontline role faded.
Physical survivors now rest at armor and airborne museums, on base display pads, and in collections across the United States. Visitors can still see the unusual outline of a tank built to keep pace with paratroopers, helicopters, and Cold War expectations, then tested in a very different war. Photographs and video from Dispatch and TrackPads.com show Sheridans in muddy Vietnam firebases and later training grounds. For modern listeners, the Sheridan remains a reminder that every bold solution carries human consequences for the crews inside it. You can also hear narrated versions of Arsenal features through the TrackPads podcast feeds and Dispatch audio editions.